I'm 82 years old now, and I don't have many mornings left that feel like they belong to me. At this age, you wake up aware of time the way you used to be aware of weather. It's just there. You feel it in your bones before your feet touch the floor. You don't assume there will be thousands more days. You hope for a few good ones. You're grateful when the kettle still feels light enough to lift. A few months ago, my grandson showed me something on his phone, some video with the words, "Listen to this every morning, $1 billion advice." He laughed and asked if I wanted to hear it. I told him no, not because I knew what it would say, but because I already knew what it wouldn't. It wouldn't give me back what I spent most of my life trading away. When you're young, you think mistakes look like disasters. You think they arrive loudly. You imagine you'll recognize them when they come. But the biggest mistake of my life didn't look like a mistake at all. It looked responsible. It looked admirable. It looked like a man doing what he was supposed to do. I was 27 when I got my first real job. Not the kind you brag about, but the kind you hold on to tightly because you grew up watching your father worry about money. It was steady, predictable. It came with a desk, a nameplate, and a supervisor who shook my hand like I mattered. That was enough for me. I married young. We didn't have much, a small apartment with thin walls and a window that looked out onto a parking lot. My wife used to put plants on the sill to make it feel alive. Most of them died. We didn't know how to take care of plants. We barely knew how to take care of ourselves, but we were kind to each other. That's what I remember most. Back then, I believed love meant providing. I believed being present meant working hard so that someday we could relax. I thought life would start later, after things were secure. Later is a very convincing word when you're 30. I worked longer hours because that's what everyone else did, said yes when I should have gone home, took promotions that sounded important, and came with titles that made my mother proud when she told her friends. I told myself I was building something, and I was. Just not what I thought. We had a son, then a daughter. Babies don't wait for you to finish your workday. They arrive loud and messy and needing everything at once. I remember holding my son in the hospital and feeling terrified, not of fatherhood, of failing at it. So I did what I thought fathers did. I went back to work. I missed small things first. A school pickup here, a bedtime there. Nothing dramatic, nothing you could point to and say, that was the moment. My wife would tell me stories at night about what the kids said or did. I laughed, I listened, but I wasn't there. An absence I learned too late has weight. It settles. There was always a reason, a meeting, a deadline, a client. I told myself I was doing it for them, that one day they would understand. One evening, my daughter asked if I could come to her school play. She was 6. She had one line, just one. I said I would try. That word should never be used with children. They hear it as a promise. I didn't make it. Traffic, I said. Something urgent at the office, I said. She nodded when I apologized. Kids are forgiving in a way that feels like mercy. But she stopped asking me after that, not right away, gradually. That's how distance begins. Not with anger, with adjustment. Years passed. I kept working. We moved into a bigger house, then a better neighborhood. The kind of place I once believed meant you had made it. Fresh paint, trimmed lawns, a garage full of things we barely used because I was rarely home early enough to enjoy them. My wife started doing things without me. At first she would ask, then she would inform. Eventually she didn't mention them at all. She built a life that functioned around my absence. We never had a big fight about it. That's what surprises people when I tell them. There was no explosion, no dramatic collapse, just quiet rearranging. I told myself this was normal, that marriages settled, that children grew independent, that exhaustion was part of being an adult. You can explain almost anything if you don't want to look at it too closely. In my 40s, I became very successful by every external measure, the kind of success that gets you handshakes and polite admiration. People asked me how I did it. They called me disciplined, focused, reliable. I believed them. But I started noticing something strange. When I came home, the house didn't feel like mine. Not in a sad way, in a factual way. It ran perfectly well without me. Everyone had rhythms I didn't quite understand. At dinner, conversations moved fast. inside jokes I couldn't follow, references to moments I hadn't witnessed. I laughed along. You learned to pretend you weren't late to your own life. The turning point didn't come as a tragedy. It came as a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. My wife had been diagnosed with an illness, serious but not sudden, the kind that gives you time, time to adjust, time to care for someone, time to sit beside them, time I assumed we had plenty of. I told my office I would reduce my hours. I meant it when I said it. But habits built over decades don't loosen easily. I still checked emails, still took calls, still believed things needed my attention. She never complained. That was her way, gentle, undemanding. She would sit in the living room with a blanket over her knees, reading or simply resting while I typed in the next room. I thought proximity was enough. That being in the same house counted. One afternoon, she asked if we could just sit together for a while. No television, no talking, just sit. I remember saying, "Give me 10 minutes." 10 minutes turned into 45. By the time I came in, she had fallen asleep. I didn't wake her. I told myself there would be other afternoons. There weren't as many as I thought. Illness doesn't move dramatically most of the time. It moves quietly. Then one day you realize the person you love has become fragile in ways you can't fix. Near the end, she looked at me with a kind of calm I didn't understand. Not anger, not disappointment, just acceptance. She held my hand and said, "You were always trying so hard." Not "you did well," not "thank you," just that. I didn't know what to say back. I still don't. After she was gone, the house became very organized. That's the strange thing about grief when you're older. It isn't chaos. It's order reminding you someone is missing. Her chair stayed where it was, her mug in the cabinet, her coat by the door for longer than it needed to be. The children visited, they were kind, they loved me, but they had their own lives now, full ones, built in the spaces where I had not always been present. You cannot insert yourself into memories that never formed. We talk, we care about each other, but there are gaps, whole landscapes of shared experience that belong to them and their mother, not to me. That is what can't be fixed. People think regret is about what you did wrong. For me, it's about what I postponed. I kept believing life would begin after the next achievement, the next milestone, the next stretch of effort. But life was already happening. In kitchens, in car rides, in ordinary Tuesdays I treated like placeholders. Now my mornings are very simple. I wake up, I make tea, I sit by the window. Sometimes I hear children walking to school down the street. Their voices carry bright, unfinished. I don't rush anymore. There's nowhere I need to be that matters more than where I already am. If you're listening to me now, I'm not here to tell you how to live. I've lost the authority to give instructions. All I have is what I see when I look back. And what I see is that time doesn't announce its value while you're spending it. It feels ordinary, replaceable, endless. It isn't. If something in this old man's story feels familiar to you, just notice that feeling. You don't have to change your whole life. You don't have to make grand decisions. Just notice where you are when the people you love are near you. That's all I wish I had done more often. I used to think wisdom arrived like a speech, something clear and powerful you could listen to every morning and become better because of it. But it doesn't work that way. Understanding arrives quietly, usually when there's very little time left to use it. I don't know how many more mornings I'll see. But tomorrow, if I wake up, I'll make my tea again. I'll sit by the window again. I'll remember voices and rooms and moments I once hurried through, and I'll try, in whatever time remains, not to hurry through anything at all.